There's a moment in some people's healing where everything quietly flips. For my guest today, after 20 years with an MS diagnosis, trying all the diets, supplements, spiritual practices, and protocols, one missing link finally revealed itself. It wasn't a new lab test, it wasn't a supplement stack. It was the way she related to her nervous system, something she now calls nervous system restoration, and it changed the entire trajectory of her health and her life. Nervous system restoration is one of the most overlooked missing links in healing chronic illness naturally, yet it's rarely talked about in conventional healing conversations. If you are living with chronic illness or unresolved health conditions, feeling betrayed by your body, or exhausted from trying every healing protocol, stay with us. Today, we'll explore how your body's own wisdom can be the medicine you've been looking for, the missing link that transformed my guest's MS journey, and the practical steps you can start using immediately. Welcome to Awaken Your Authentic Self, the space where we explore the deep inner shifts that create real healing emotionally, spiritually, and physically. I'm Jessica Rooks, and my intention with every conversation is to bring you the better medicine, the stories, tools, and perspectives that help you come home to yourself instead of outsourcing your power. On this show, we've explored how subconscious blocks can be the missing link in manifestation. That was Dr. Elise Janelle's Heart Freedom Method. We've bridged psychology and spirituality, how trauma and nervous system patterns shape life experiences, and how survivors turn trauma into awakening. Today, we're entering the world of chronic illness and the nervous system restoration. Not just how to regulate it for a moment of calm, but how to restore it so your whole system can reorganize around health. My guest is someone who has lived this from the inside out. Christine Ruch was diagnosed with MS 20 years ago. In that time, she has earned a degree in holistic nutrition, raised children, built and ran a beloved restaurant and bodega in Boulder, Colorado, and immersed herself in what I'd call a whole constellation of healing modalities: whole food nutrition, somatic awareness, trauma release, spiritual practice, plant medicine, and both Eastern and Western approaches. Over 2 decades, she didn't just collect tools, she followed a sacred trail back into relationship with her body and her nervous system. The result? She naturally healed not only the MS, but other chronic conditions as well. And now she serves as a holistic transformation guide for people with unresolved health conditions who are ready to reclaim their healing from the inside out. Christine, welcome to Awaken Your Authentic Self. I am so honored that you are here.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you. Well, let's dive in because, Christine, I want to start at the moment that everything changed. For someone who's just received a life-altering diagnosis, your story offers a very different path. What was the emotional and spiritual turning point where you said, I'm not going to surrender my life to this prognosis. I'm going to find another way? And what did those very first self-directed steps actually look like in real life with kids in a restaurant and everything else on your plate?
Yeah, thank you for asking. My children were very young when I was diagnosed. And so this is before I actually had a restaurant, but it was difficult to have such young children and then be facing a diagnosis that people tell you you're going to be in a wheelchair or you're going to be blind or bedridden. when you have such young children. So it was definitely, a big diagnosis to come to terms with. I think, though, as luck would have it, I started so small. I definitely knew of the power of the human body to heal, but that was so long ago. I just didn't have nearly as much knowledge as I do now, of course.
Right.
But I started really small. I started with changing my diet. And I didn't change my diet necessarily to reverse MS. Um, that wasn't necessarily what it was, but I was seeing a naturopath, and she's the one who suggested to me that I have a food sensitivity panel. And I had been resisting that course because I thought that I thought that I was really healthy. I really ate well, and I thought that I did. And at any rate, so I did. I had this food sensitivity panel, and at that time, I didn't really understand how food was really affecting my mobility.
Right.
But as the case was, I was definitely not called to pursue pharmaceutical intervention because I had a long past of being very sensitive to pharmaceutical drugs, and the drugs were very heavy duty and very big drugs.
Mhm.
And so I just started small. I decided that I wasn't very healthy and I was not going to be able to withstand the rigors of pharmaceutical intervention unless I was healthier, air quotes. And so I did. I just embarked on this like food elimination diet, and at the direction of my naturopath. And then that's the door that opened because the power of food to change the trajectory of my disease is was really powerful, and it was definitely the thing that spurred me to get my degree in holistic nutrition and then open a restaurant so that I could serve people the food that truly nourishes us and brings us to better health. So that was kind of the very first step.
I love that. Well, let me just ask, many people with chronic illness, they feel like their symptoms are the enemy. Christine, can you share a specific moment when your symptoms were trying to tell you something and instead of fighting them, you listened? How did that moment shift the trajectory of your healing? And what practical steps would you suggest for listeners noticing the same signals today?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Such a good question because it does start continually. It just starts really small, and like listening to these small things, and it is a reframe, right? Like a lot of us feel, fully captured by the physical symptoms that we are experiencing and feel like dismayed and discouraged, or like their body is deceiving them.
Right.
And that's really natural. Like that's a real natural way to it's kind of what we're conditioned to believe. but but yeah, I guess it just started really small with like again like these small changes and recognizing, oh, this is my body actually telling me something, and it's not actually my body deceiving me. And I just had so many different like food as it relates. Like for example, I had such bad skin. I had so many skin conditions that I didn't ever consider food was a part of. And as soon as I changed my diet, then my skin became like perfectly clear. And I was just like so shocked. Like that was a connection of like, oh, all of the things I struggled with my skin was really my body telling me that it was the food that I was eating that it wasn't happy with.
Right.
And so just small things like that. I had a lot of digestive problems later when I started changing my diet, and I yeah, it's just continually reframing, um, pulling back from the the way that we talk about ourselves to ourselves. Like my body is failing me,
Right.
and pulling back from that and trying to reframe it to say, what is the lesson I'm supposed to be learning here? What is it my body is trying to tell me? And when you do that over and over by slow degrees, then you start to come into a different layer of communication with the wisdom of your body. And so, yeah, it's not like a perfect thing all at once. I think it takes a little bit of time, but you will be rewarded because
Absolutely.
when you start listening and taking aligned action, then your body does respond. And then when you have these type of responses that are so kind of naturally evolved from your choices, your body shifts. And when you keep seeing that over and over and over again, it really changes your relationship with the dialogue with your body and the dialogue. You start noticing the way you talk to yourself about yourself and little things like that.
Well, I always say words have power.
Yes, they
Absolutely
sure
do.
do.
This,
They
it
do.
just, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no. I was just going to add to that. I apologize for interrupting, but words definitely have power, and so much more like the words that we say to ourselves unconsciously, subconsciously, over and over again.
I always
That
tell
is super
people that.
powerful.
I always tell
Yeah,
people you need to keep your thoughts and your words aligned. Like
a
if they're
thousand
not
percent.
aligned, I'm like, that is no different than going to buy a lotto ticket and then in your head going, I'm never going to win. Like, no, you're not going to win. Like,
No,
keep your,
you're not.
like stay aligned, and magic happens. Oh, this really
Well,
reminds me of my conversation that I did have with Dr. Lise Janelle on subconscious healing, because just how tuning into the signals rather than suppressing them just unlocks transformation.
it does really unlock transformation. And what I love that you said, which is very much in line with the work that I do, is this idea of alignment.
Mhm.
We don't recognize how much we're out of alignment in so many other ways, not just the way we talk about ourselves to ourselves.
Absolutely.
You know,
Now, let me ask, many people with chronic illness, they try everything and they
hmm
feel exhausted by the process.
yes.
From your perspective, what are some ways that we unintentionally try to control the body in the name of healing? And I'm using my air quotes. And what does it look like to move into cooperation with the body and the nervous system instead?
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating how we do that. Um, could you reframe the question again? I'm so sorry. I'm like really trying to pull all my thoughts together because that was such a good question. I would love to have you reframe that again.
Absolutely. Um, One is, what are some ways that we unintentionally try to control the body in the name of
Ah,
healing?
yeah.
And what does it look like to move into cooperation with the body and the nervous system instead? Like, what does it
Yeah,
look
I
like?
think like this whole idea of forcing and pushing, and I think a lot of that's the thing that leads to the exhaustion, right?
Hmm.
Because there's so many different protocols and doctors, and you know they put you on different protocols, and that becomes exhausting, and you're trying to force your way to better health and mentally like forcing your way into it, and it's like interesting because it's actually not in alignment with how the body actually naturally heals.
Right.
And I think that if we can start to recognize maybe that the body actually heals in its own divine way, and I don't mean that necessarily from a spiritual lens, but just from a true biomechanical lens as well. It's just like we can't force the changing of the seasons, and we can't force the length of a pregnancy.
Right. Ah, don't we wish?
We Yeah, don't we wish, right? There's many things that we just allow to evolve, right? And I love to use the analogy of pregnancy because it is a mysterious process, and you can't force your way into like making the baby come faster or grow quicker.
Hmm.
Um, and but if we recognize that our healing in healing our body is very much the same way, if we support the natural tendency of our body to heal, if we support that process and get out of our own way and just create the supportive environment for that process to unfold, then suddenly we're not forcing and pushing, which relaxes the nervous system,
Right.
and we're just allowing. what is going to happen. And that's also really powerful. And so I think it starts like that, is recognizing that these subtle things that we do, it actually sabotages us,
Right.
like mostly because a lot of our culture around healing isn't doesn't embrace that belief that the body wants to heal in its own way. And it took a long time for you to get sick. And so it's not like a 30-day reset that you're going to suddenly reverse the trajectory of your disease. It took a long time to get there. It's going to definitely take time to unravel what got you there to begin with.
Absolutely. I'll share that. I had been diagnosed when I was living in New York with autoimmune disease called spondyloarthropathy, as well as fibromyalgia and how many other little things.
Yeah.
And I always said to myself, I had told my late husband and everything, I said, the cold is affecting me in a negative way. And I just feel that if I moved to a warmer climate, everything would change.
Yeah.
Well, funny thing is, moved to Florida after he passed, it healed a lot of my symptoms, but not everything. What kind of healed everything for me is I had a whole conversation with the universe where I just gave myself to the universe. I gave myself to source. And I said, I
Yeah.
don't know what's keeping me sick. I don't care what at this point, anything that no longer serves me, just remove it. Remove it from my life. Remove every. Do you know? It took the alcohol away, took the caffeine away, took all the meat away. Became a vegetarian. All this within 6 months, and this thing I was dealing with involved every arthritis plus Crohn's disease. Everything's gone. Mostly by
Yeah.
changing my diet, and changing my atmosphere, changing the stress levels, changing my job.
And what's so interesting about that insight into your health is like nothing that you said was a lot of forcing.
Nope.
It was a lot of allowing. It
Yes.
was a lot of surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of trusting, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so like changing your diet maybe could look forced, but it was like no, you released all of these things that you felt intuitively were no longer serving
Well,
you,
when I
which is a
asked,
little bit of a different energetic like signature, right?
oh yes, my signature was definitely all mine. I definitely did things in a different way. But my
Yeah.
thing is, I asked for everything to be removed. So all of a sudden, if I'm eating a piece of steak, which is my favorite, and for not, excuse me for being gross, but it's making me throw up afterwards, something is not, I feel like, okay, I asked for this. This is what I asked for, was a sign
Yes.
to let me know that this no longer was working for me. And
Yeah.
that's what it did for every little thing. But it did at least one at a time. Like it took the the pork away first, then it took away the beef, and then a few weeks later, then I couldn't eat chicken anymore, and then so it was just it was a gradual process. But within 6 months, my whole diet was changed.
Well, but like this goes back to what we were talking about. Like this wasn't something when you woke up in the morning and you're like, I'm vegan today
Yeah,
or whatever,
exactly.
right? Like it just was this slow evolution as you recognize like this isn't working for me, okay, and you adjusted, and then this isn't working, and then you adjusted, and
Exactly.
that is like the magic in my mind. Listening to your reflection.
It's well, I love the way you expanded this whole how self attack doesn't create healing into the physical realm beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for someone at the very beginning who's feeling overwhelmed by options, if a listener came to you saying, I want to heal naturally, but I don't know where to start, how would you help them to discern what to prioritize first so that they're not just chasing the next protocol, but actually building a coherent healing path for themselves?
That's such a great question, and I think that as I come to it today, and I reflect on 20 years of all of the different things that I've done, that all moved the needle for me. It all got me to where I am today. Nothing was like a failed mission insofar as my healing journey. But having said that, now that I work with the nervous system level, I feel like how more quickly would I have been able to heal if I started there first? Like
Mm,
20 years ago, no one was even having this conversation. I mean, and they're barely having this conversation today.
absolutely.
Um,
I've not
it
heard it
feels
before. I read it from you.
right. And so it's like this esoteric kind of like nichey thing that's not, I think the nervous system is getting a lot more, a lot of people are using that word. And a lot of people are starting to recognize that there is some connection to the nervous system, but it feels a little nebulous.
Right.
Um, and, but I feel like if I had started, like I was doing all of these external modalities to impact my health, right?
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But if I had started and I understood that I had a nervous system that was completely shaped by my childhood, and then as all nervous systems are, and and then I created a whole life to keep my nervous system at that same level of, let's say, homeostasis, which it wasn't.
Right.
And then I never ever looked at that, but I tried all of these external things to exert control over my disease. When in fact, if I had come to it from a totally different way of learning to listen to myself from a different perspective, even though we're just talking about now, like how we adjusted our diets by listening to our body and things like that. But to answer your question more specifically, like today, I definitely see, and I see in others, how if we go to our nervous system first, and we don't need to go to the symptomology
Right.
um, to address the symptoms individually, but rather we just put all of that aside and start with the nervous system. That the actually system knows how to heal your whole body.
Right.
And when you start addressing the nervous system, then all of those things that all of your symptoms actually start to shift all on their own without you having to go after each and every symptom. And I think that's a more supportive and expansive way um, to look at the healing process. Is like we don't need to go and chase after like individual, and not to say that there aren't individual symptoms, like I feel like I have leaky gut, or I feel like I can't digest food, or I have insomnia, or I have
Hmm.
anxiety, right? Like, I understand the need to address those things individually, but what if you could take the pressure off of chasing all of that? And what if you could take that same energy that you put into all of those things and put them back into yourself first?
Right.
And then from that place, then the aligned action starts to arise, similar to the way your body said no to these, to meat. It's a similar kind of thing where this wisdom comes from deep within by going to your nervous system first, and it's more supportive and more gentle.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's more supportive and more gentle. And I think that that's something, especially when you're looking at a chronic illness or a big disease diagnosis that feels really overwhelming. Um, it's really nice to actually be able to try to envelop a place within yourself of gentleness and love and kindness, as opposed to anger and fear and distrust in
And
your body
frustration and
and frustration and all
Mhm.
of those sort of understandable um, emotions. Does that make sense? Like to go in just directly to the nervous system and set aside all of the other symptoms that you're experiencing for a minute.
It absolutely makes sense because, I mean, it's like anything else when you think about like even the law of attraction.
Yes.
Anything that you focus on is what you're going to manifest more of.
Yeah.
So
A
if you're
hundred
going to focus
percent.
on the frustration and you're going to focus on the fear and you're going to focus on all the negative, all you're going to do is create a worse scenario for yourself. It's like the subconscious patterns, they influence manifestation. Chronic illness often reflects unresolved nervous system tension.
It's the truth. And then you take this idea of what you just said and building on it, and then you go to see a doctor because, let's say, we're going to focus on digestion. Because so many chronic illnesses have a digestive component.
Mm-hmm.
And and then you are filled with like anger and disgust and frustration and fear because of your your digestive problems. And then you're going to go see a doctor, and then they're going to look at your digestive problems, and then they're going to order a bunch of tests to figure out what's wrong with your gut. And then you're going to get all these data markers that show you and confirm all of the things that you think that are wrong with your digestion.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to put you on all of these like diets and pills and tinctures or protocols, and all that whole entire process only reaffirms your initial sense of like betrayal of your body.
Absolutely.
And right, as opposed to, it's like that whole energy is just a confirmation bias. And it's
Absolutely.
not that there isn't something wrong with your digestion, but like you're reinforcing that negative energy by taking that path with that type of energy attached to it.
You're
If that
feeding it. You're feeding it
you're
power.
you're completely feeding it. So it's fascinating.
It really is.
It really is.
It
Because
really.
when you're able to step away from that and redirect your energy, it is overwhelmingly awe-inspiring how the body responds more quickly and in its own with its own intelligence without you having to manipulate anything. It knows what to do.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
When I shared that story with you, it's like when I left New York to come to Florida, well, to go to Florida, I'm not there anymore. I decided, like, I'm done. I'm done with the doctors. I'm done with the medications. The funny thing was
Yes.
that COVID seemed to happen at the same time. So it kind of helped me along a little bit because I couldn't even find a doctor if I
Yeah.
wanted one. So, like, I was
Yeah.
getting 6 hour infusions. I mean, 4 hour infusions every 6 weeks. Then how many different medications? I got off of everything. And I said, I'm
Yeah.
just going to focus on this myself and do it. Everybody was, oh, you can't do that. Watch me.
Right? Watch me. Yes, I had the same thing. People would be like 20 years ago, they're like, you're really going to do that? You think that you can like, a change in your diet is going to change like your mobility? Like you're going to be able to walk again? And I was like, yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, I do. And even though I had no idea what I was doing back then, but it's really true. Like when you start to take ownership of yourself,
Your body
and
follows suit. It's like, all right, let's do this.
yeah, yes, it's true. And a lot of us, it's like so disempowering too, right? Like a lot of times we're not accustomed to this idea, number one, that you can heal yourself of something big.
Right.
Like you recognize I have a broken bone, I can heal, or like I can get over a cold or the flu. But something massive like a diagnosis, like you and I are talking about autoimmune diseases, it's like kind of not really commonly accepted that you absolutely can affect the trajectory of your disease by just listening to yourself, being true to yourself, trusting yourself, and taking your power back.
There are people who have, it is known, documented facts, people who have cured their own cancer without
Yes.
one radiation or one treatment, just by focusing and having a positive mindset and focusing
Yeah,
on their bodies.
absolutely. Yeah, and choosing like I'm trusting instead of like fighting.
Trust
And
and
a lot of
faith
that
and
comes back
flow.
to the surrendering and like the control
Absolutely.
and the surrender, the balance between that.
Oh, I love this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we continue today's episode, I want to share one of my favorite collections from Luna Inverse Studio. The Awaken Your Authentic Self collection was created for those moments when life invites us to stop performing, stop pretending, and simply come home to ourselves. These aren't just shirts, they're wearable reminders to live with courage, authenticity, and intention. If one speaks to your soul, you can explore the collection through the link in today's show notes. Now, let's return to today's conversation. Well, at the beginning of this conversation, we did tease that you discovered a missing link in your healing, nervous system restoration.
Yeah.
Christine, what was the moment you realized that deep nervous system restoration, not just quick regulation techniques, was the missing link? And could you walk listeners through 3 practical changes that began in your day-to-day life and body once you started relating to the nervous system this way?
Yeah. Well, I came to this work in a really dramatic way. Um, because I had a lot of control over my life and my health. And then I had businesses where I had a restaurant, which there's a lot of control in restaurants, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to control a lot of people to get the outcome that you want. And suddenly, this is post COVID, like 22. And, the stress of having a restaurant during COVID was pretty intense. Um, and suddenly everything was no longer working. And I did something super radical. I wouldn't suggest it, but it sounds like you and I probably share a little bit of the radical nature to our personalities. Um, and for better or for worse. And I closed everything like within 4 days. I just stopped. I just knew that I was just done. And turns out, like, anybody who's listening and has a thriving business, you don't just like close the doors in 4 days without there being ramifications. And so there was. And then my marriage didn't survive that. And I had a whole bunch of loss. And I found my way, like to save my life practically. And all the same, as I'm telling this story, none of this had anything to do with multiple sclerosis.
Right.
This had to do with my mental frame of mind and me saving my life. And I moved to Costa Rica by myself to just try to figure out what happened. What did I do? How did I get here? Like, how did this happen to me?
Right.
Or why did this happen for me? Like just try to make sense of it. And I landed in the company of 2 incredible healers. And I didn't know that I was doing anything with nervous system, to be honest with you, when I started working with them. I had no idea. I just knew that they were going to support me to try to figure out, like, what did I do? How did I destroy my life? But through that process, that's when I started to recognize, like, oh my gosh. And so to answer your question, like, what were the 3 things that started? Like, I didn't know. This was never, even though I like had this wellness mecca in Boulder, Colorado, which is a pretty wellness oriented community. And I have a degree in holistic nutrition and like I like was super well informed and working with a lot of really great alternative healers. I felt like I was pretty educated, but
Right.
nobody was ever talking about the nervous system. And no one was ever like pointed out to me that I had absolutely no capacity. I had no nervous system regulation. I had no emotional capacity
Right.
whatsoever. I didn't even know what that meant. And so it was this process of learning to sit with myself and not meditation, but sitting with all of the things that you're feeling
Right.
without there being anything to fix. And just that very small practice of starting really gently, really slowly to just sit with anything that you're feeling and reminding myself over and over again that I am okay to feel this, right? Like, this doesn't mean anything about me. It's just a feeling that I'm experiencing and it doesn't define who I am. And that I am enough to be able to hold this feeling that I'm experiencing, which at that time was a lot of sadness and a lot of despair and a lot of grief. And then I can actually hold all of this And that subtle thing to learn how to hold yourself actually is the key to unlocking the door to everything else changing in your entire life. And it's so subtle and it's so profound that just starting with this tiny little thing where you're sitting with yourself like 30 seconds at a time, and this is where I start with people, is just 30 seconds at a time learning to hold the emotional state that you're experiencing and allow yourself to feel it without attaching any outcome to it, without, like, a lot of times, as I understand it now, we experience an emotional space, and then we really identify with that. And
Right.
then from that, we create an identity around that, like, I am depressed, I am anxious, I am mad, as opposed to I am experiencing a moment of anger. And then, and then from that identity, then we create stories like, I'm a depressed person, and then you create all these stories that support your depressed your
Right.
your idea that you are a depressed person. And then from those stories, then you make decisions. And what if none of those are true? And if you could just hold yourself in this emotional space and trust that the emotion will pass and it doesn't identify you and it doesn't mean anything about you. It just means that you're experiencing this emotional space and you can hold your emotions. And then you start to build capacity to hold the little things without it freaking you out. And then over time, your capacity grows exponentially. So you're able to hold much bigger emotional states without it triggering you. And then the thing that ends up happening that's fascinating is through the process, then the little tiny things that would cause you to be triggered, or relationships or circumstances that are always like your sore point, or all of that actually melts away. You don't even need to, it just actually leaves. You're just literally no longer affected by the same things that you used to be, like, that would really bother you. So, long answer to your question, but I do believe it starts with these really small steps of learning to hold your emotions and build emotional capacity, like 30 seconds at a time, and trusting that you can do this. And then over time, you learn to hold all of yourself. And that's pretty powerful. We don't really think about it like that, that we can hold everything that we are.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
In somatic trauma work, we see the nervous system reorganize when the person moves from resistance to listening, and your approach, it mirrors that perfectly.
Yeah. I think, like, one of the things that's interesting is like this conversation about how the nervous system really wants to regulate.
Hmm.
And I think that there's a lot of people who are entering this space in a timely way, because it is really, like, we see all around us this disordered nervous system. It's almost systemic, societally systemic. And I think that there's a lot of really great modalities, especially as it relates to like trauma release and things like that.
Hmm.
But a lot of times with trauma release, if you're not able to hold the emotions that are being stored in your body to keep you safe, if you're not able to actually hold yourself as those things emerge and arise and are cleared from your system, that can almost be re-triggering in a lot of ways.
I can see
And
that.
so
Yeah.
it's like when you learn to hold yourself and increase your capacity to hold your emotions, then you're able, then the trauma that is holding your nervous system back in contraction and constriction, and your nervous system wants to release all of that, then you can allow that to happen. Like these things to just start being released. But I think that this is a modality around allowing as opposed to forcing. Again, like a lot of our conversation this whole time
Right.
is about surrendering and allowing and trusting and not forcing and controlling.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I think when we recognize that the nervous system has its own divine intelligence, And if we can support and understand that intelligence and support that, as opposed, it's not something that we biohack, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe a biohack, like a hack, like a polyvagal theory or vagus nerve reset. Like those are all hacks.
Mm-hmm.
And those might provide like temporary relief, but they don't actually
There's no
do a
long-term.
long-term modulation
No,
of your nervous system.
no,
You'll
no.
go right back to where you were before.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask, you distinguish between being a coach and a guide.
Yeah.
How does being guided back to inner authority rather than following expert instructions shift outcomes in healing chronic illness naturally?
Yeah. I love that question because, you know, a coach will want, generally speaking, and a general description. A coach has an outcome in mind for you, and then you're going to follow their system or their protocol or their methodology, and they're going to coach you to an outcome. And that's what you buy into when you go into that container. Whereas for me, I know that all the wisdom you need is already within you. And it's your design wisdom, it's not mine. And holding the space for you to discover that within yourself. And that's very different because I don't have like a forced approach to this or like a trajectory, like in 90 days, this is going to be the outcome.
Right.
Now, I can't say in 90 days, if you start these small practices, your whole life will change, but what that looks like is very individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I just support and hold space for somebody to find their own strength, their own inner voice, and learn to trust it. Because a lot of times our truth is buried underneath the cacophony of all the other things in our mind, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of hard to discern sometimes, like what's true and what isn't, and what's mine and what's not, and and then to have the courage to follow through with something that might be an instinct or like, you know, it's sometimes it's very very hard for people to trust the things that they instinctually know, and so it's really more about holding space for them to learn to trust themselves and find their own inner wisdom than it is for me to force my agenda on their healing process.
That makes so much sense. I think it's that instinct, like you said, learning to understand and trust yourself. It's
Yeah,
kind of
trust
like
yourself.
it's kind of like getting a psychic message. You know, the
Yeah.
voice sounds like you, even though the message is being said makes no sense to you.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, learning to trust yourself. And this is where this type of work coming into the nervous system and learning to build capacity first and setting aside all the other stuff will fix all on its own. We just start with this tiny little thing that you can do. And the self trust that emerges from that. And then when you start to trust yourself, you become so much more empowered.
Oh yes.
Do you know, I think it's such a timely thing. I wonder how many people trust themselves or even know what that feels like within to have utter trust in themselves.
Well, if my life is any indication, I only started trusting myself around 2022.
Yes, me too.
So,
I only
and
started trusting myself once I closed everything and I walked away from my life.
well, you know, mine kind of led
Hopefully,
into that.
nobody has to do that to get to that point.
Well, you know, my listeners who know my story, they know that this past September, I left a corporate job of 16 years and I
Yeah.
just felt was feeling pushed out and aligned and being guided to do what I'm doing now, which was leave the States, start traveling, stick with your podcast. Other things are going to come and everything is going to work out for you. And I just said, okay. And I handed in my letter of
Yes.
resignation, left my job. My boyfriend and I sold off and donated everything else. And left the
I
States and
love
we've been
that.
traveling since October 1st. So yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah. So when you say that you and I are
That's so
kind of radical that
liberating.
way,
Yeah, see, but you and I share that trait, right? That radical nature.
that
Um,
which is not for
and
everybody. So everybody listening, that does not
no,
work for everybody. You really do have
yeah,
to
right.
have that
Like
intuitive trust and faith. Like there has to be that baseline, I think.
there has to be that baseline, but what I think it is super empowering, hopefully for the listeners, even if they're not going to do what I did or what you did. I walked away from my career too. Like a lot of people expected I would continue to be a chef forever and open another restaurant. And I was just like, no, I'm a
No.
healer. I'm not a chef.
Yes.
I just teach like my passion. And at that point in time, my passion was, and it still is food, right? I'm always going to love to create in the kitchen. But all the same, it's like my message around healing is has taken on an I had to trust that and
Hmm.
trust like, no, I'm being guided to share a bigger message about how we really do heal. And I had to go through all of this myself so that I could bring this message to others and just
Absolutely.
trust that this message and where I'm being guided is greater than any sort of like I didn't close everything and walk away from everything so that I could do it all again, you
Exactly.
know? So it's like I just needed to continue to trust myself that I have a bigger message to hopefully inspire other people or help them connect to their own ability to heal and make radical change within their lives,
See, and
whatever that looks like for them.
my purpose is to not just meet and interview you, but through every interview, there's so many different ways to reach the
Yes.
same goal. And I feel like I'm just
100%.
kind of packaging like these different medicines for everybody and just helping people to
Yes.
realize and to find a commonality and feel I'm not alone.
Yes. I love what you just said though too is like there are so many beautiful powerful ways you talk to all these people and you've had a lot of experiences in your own health journey.
Yes.
I've had so many experiences in my health journey and and but what I find empowering about our shared experience is like all of that is within us and all of that is available to us and none of that has to do with like the dogma of conventional medicine
No,
and the dogma of pharmaceutical intervention being the gold standard, and that
absolutely.
there's so many different healing modalities out there that have nothing to do with the conventional wisdom.
Absolutely. And I really hope that if nothing else, people do truly realize that they hear, if nothing else, that they hear that. You have so
Yeah, that
many
they really
options
feel that.
available to you that are so natural that really
Yeah,
just empower you to take your power back and to heal
totally.
yourself.
Absolutely. It's really fascinating and I think it's like urgent for people to fully like not just listen but really start to take this into their own path, because I'm not so sure that the healing the healthcare systems of today and all of that stuff, I think we're starting to see more fractures in the healthcare system
Hmm.
and more fractures in societally the way in which we feel supported to heal, like whether it's food, like our food supply is sort of shoddy. Like there's a lot of things that are kind of breaking down, and not to sound like dire or pessimistic, but I hope that it's bringing people back to this idea of like everything that you are seeking is within you, and within you, you're going to find like whether it's your wisdom that you listening to your body and giving up all the things that you needed to give up and your dietary changes that shaped your health in incredible ways. Like that was inside of you.
Hmm.
You started to listen to that wisdom and that guidance. So I don't know. I just think hopefully people can want a little bit of that for themselves.
And also something you mentioned that there was another missing piece to that, that the one thing that actually I think that lingered the most for me was the Crohn's disease. And that completely disappeared when I left the US and my food supply changed.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely noticed a lot of shifts in my health too, living in Costa Rica for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And very different food, and a lot closer to the land, and not a lot of difference, in the supply chain. The yogurt was like from the cow down the street, and the eggs were from the chickens that are roaming the neighborhood. You know what I mean?
Eggs. When you see
And
the eggs out on the shelf and they're not refrigerated, that
yeah,
right there is telling you a whole lot.
it sure is.
Because I remember at first I was like,
100%.
am I supposed to eat that egg? And then when I had, of course, the Google nerd in me is like, okay, well, how come in the US we refrigerate our eggs and they don't do that over here in Spain? And then to find out because
Right?
they're washing off the protective coating of the egg, which now requires it to be refrigerated so that it would, like, wow.
Yeah. Wow, right? Yeah, and you can go down any of those rabbit holes and start to recognize that, like, the way we process our food does not really serve anybody's health in this country.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, so it's definitely been an adjustment for me moving back to the States, and like the shift in, like, again, the food quality. And I prefer to live closer to the land, like
Well, it doesn't get
that's
much
my
closer than
that's
where I
my
am now.
jam.
Right now,
Yeah.
we're currently in the Philippines, and
Oh wow.
we're on this tiny little island in the Camote Islands, right in the middle. And when we go to the farmers market, I mean, you literally find like caterpillars and the little bugs on your, the beetles and stuff on your lettuce because they're pulling it right out their own where they're growing it from.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's a whole different, it's like, okay, this is what we wanted. We just have to really, really, really clean it now.
Yes, 100%. I had to have that same like learning curve as well, like buying greens. And it was just like, well, you better eat those greens in like 2 days because
Yes.
there is a lot of microbial activity in those greens, and they're going to be going to the bugs before they get into your stomach.
Exactly. But they're so they taste completely different. Oh my
It's
goodness.
completely different.
Christine, this has been so deeply nourishing. Oh my gosh. I could talk to you for hours. What you've shared, especially about illness as a sacred calling and the nervous system as a place of restoration, not just management, feels like such a relief and a reorientation for anyone living with chronic symptoms. But before we close, I'd love for people to know how they can connect with you and your work. So where can listeners find you online? And is there a particular offering or resource that you recommend for someone who's resonating with everything that you've shared today?
Sure. Thank you for asking. So you can go to my website, christineruch.com. And I have a lot of resources there. I write for Substack and write a lot about the nervous system, but I also write about all of the ways in which we heal, and um, and I also have recipes on there too for people who like to cook. And also, as far as an offering right now, I'm currently developing a webinar so that I can start directly connecting with people about these different practices that they can start to do themselves to take ownership of their nervous system. And then I also will be launching a 3-month course, like a 12-week nervous system immersion. And it's a group thing because, like, healing in community is really powerful, especially when everybody has a shared intention. And I also do individual mentorships and immersions and all of that type of stuff. You can find all my work online.
Perfect. Well, I will make sure to have all of Christine's links in the show description. Thank you, truly, Christine, for the way you've walked your own path so courageously and for the tenderness and clarity that you brought to us today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast.
Thank you for saying yes. To everyone listening, what today's conversation shows us is that healing chronic illness isn't just about fixing symptoms. Often, it's about restoring safety in the nervous system so the body can reorganize around health. Thank you for being here, for your openness, and for the way you keep showing up for your own healing, even when it's messy and nonlinear. If this conversation stirred something in you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes on nervous system healing, trauma, and spiritual awakening. If this conversation about nervous system restoration resonated with you, the next episode I recommend is my conversation with Dr. Lise Janelle, Heal Subconscious Blocks for Abundance and Love, the missing link in manifestation. Because many times, the nervous system and subconscious mind are working together, and it pairs beautifully with what Christine shared about the body's wisdom. So until next time, may you keep listening to your body, trusting your inner guidance, and courageously awakening your authentic self.